10,000 years of empire, and it all runs on secrets most people never even notice. One faction is secretly addicted to a drug, and if their supply ever stops, every ship in the galaxy stops with it. Another grows the dead back to life in a tank and sells that power to the highest bidder. A third breeds its army on a prison planet so lethal that simply surviving it is the training. And underneath all of them hides a single weakness so simple that by the end of this video, one move puts a knife to the throat of all 10 factions at once. Welcome back. In part 1, we broke down the 5 faces of power everyone sees in Dune: House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Corrino, the Bene Gesserit, and the Fremen. The noble houses, the Emperor, the Secret Sisterhood, and the desert people everyone underestimated. But here's the thing. Those 5 are only the visible half of the board. Behind every throne, every army, and every scheme, there's a second layer of power most people never stop to think about. The factions that actually make this universe run. The ones who control travel, trade, technology, law, and terror. Without them, not a single ship flies, not a single coin moves, and the Emperor's 10,000-year rule falls apart overnight. So, in this video, we're finishing the map. 5 more factions. The Spacing Guild, who hold a total monopoly on space travel and answer to nobody. The Bene Tleilax, whose experiments make even the Bene Gesserit uncomfortable. CHOAM, the corporation that quietly owns the economy of the entire galaxy. The Landsraad, the council of noble houses that keeps the Emperor in check. And the Sardaukar, the Emperor's dreaded elite soldiers forged on a prison planet most people don't even know exists. By the end of this, you'll see how all 10 factions lock together and why the whole structure was always far more fragile than anyone inside it realized. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go watch that first. If you're caught up, let's finish this. Every faction we've talked about wants to rule something. The Spacing Guild is different. The guild doesn't need to rule anything because it already owns the one thing every other faction literally cannot live without: the ability to travel between the stars. In the Dune universe, there's only one way to cross the impossible distances between worlds, and that's aboard a guild highliner. A vast ship that doesn't so much fly across space as fold it, collapsing the distance between 2 points so a journey of light years happens in an instant. Nobody else can do this. Not the Emperor, not the great houses, not the Bene Gesserit. If you want to move an army, ship your spice, or send a single message across the galaxy, you go through the guild. Every single time. And here's the part that makes it strange. Remember that this is a universe with no computers. Thinking machines were outlawed thousands of years ago after a war against them. So how do you safely fold space with no navigation computer to plot the jump? One wrong calculation and your ship materializes inside a star. The guild's answer is horrifying and brilliant at the same time. The Navigators. These are human beings who consume such enormous quantities of spice over a lifetime that they physically mutate, losing their human shape entirely, living inside tanks of spice gas, and in exchange, they gain a limited prescience. They can see the safe path through fold space before the ship ever moves. The guild replaced the band machine with a mutated human mind, which leads to the guild's dirty secret. The thing that quietly controls everything. They are hopelessly, permanently addicted to spice, not for pleasure but for function. Without a constant, massive supply of melange, the navigators die, the highliners stop, and the entire galaxy grinds to a halt in a single generation. The most powerful faction in the universe, the one that holds everyone else hostage, is itself completely dependent on one substance from one planet. So the guild's real agenda is simple and ruthless. The spice must flow. They don't care who rules Arrakis, whether Atreides, Harkonnen, or the Emperor, as long as the spice keeps coming. That's why they stay so publicly neutral. Their neutrality isn't nobility. It's the behavior of an addict who can't afford to pick a side. and that neutrality is its own kind of ultimate power. The guild answers to no one. It charges everyone. Even the Emperor has to rent guild ships to move his own Sardaukar, but it also means the guild has one fatal weakness that almost nobody's in a position to exploit, until someone finally is. Because if the whole faction depends on the spice flowing, then anyone who can credibly threaten to destroy the spice completely doesn't just threaten Arrakis, they hold a knife to the throat of the guild itself. Keep that in the back of your mind. It becomes the single most important lever in the entire story. But if the guild mutates human beings into something barely recognizable to keep its ships flying, there's one faction that goes even further, one that treats the human body itself as raw material to be manufactured, sold, and reshaped, and they make even the Bene Gesserit uneasy. If the Bene Gesserit breed humanity slowly, patiently, across 90 generations, the Bene Tleilax don't wait, they manufacture it. The Tleilaxu, as they're often called, are the faction everyone in the universe looks down on and nobody dares to cut off. Officially, they're merchant scientists, genetic engineers who sell biological products no one else can make. They're treated as unclean, untrustworthy, a little disgusting, and yet the Emperor, the great houses, and even the Sisterhood all quietly do business with them, because the Tleilaxu can do things that look a lot like miracles. Their most famous product is the Gola. Give the Tleilaxu a scrap of flesh from someone who died, even just dead cells, and they can grow that person back. A full living body, regrown in their axolotl tanks, indistinguishable from the original. And in their more advanced work, they learn to do something even more unsettling. They reawaken the dead person's original memories inside the regrown body. In other words, the Tleilaxu figured out how to sell resurrection. Death in this universe isn't always permanent. If you can afford the Tleilaxu's price, then there are the face dancers. These are Tleilaxu creations bred to be perfect shapeshifters, able to mimic another person's appearance, voice, and mannerisms so completely that you'd never know the person in front of you had been replaced. They're spies, infiltrators, and assassins rolled into one, and their very existence poisons trust across the entire galaxy. Once you know face dancers exist, you can never be completely certain that the advisor, the guard, or the ambassador you're talking to is actually who they claim to be. Here's the detail most casual fans never learn though, and it's the one that reframes the whole faction. The Tleilaxu aren't just immoral businessmen chasing profit. Behind that grubby merchant front hides a fanatically religious secret society. They present themselves as lowly, harmless tech dealers precisely because it makes everyone underestimate them. In truth, they're zealots who regard themselves as the only true humans and view every other person in the universe, every customer, every noble, every emperor, as essentially an animal to be used. The faction everyone treats as beneath contempt secretly holds everyone else in exactly the same contempt, and hides it behind a servant's smile. That's why even the Bene Gesserit, who are not easily disturbed by anything, keep the Tleilaxu at arm's length. The Sisterhood plays the long, careful game of guiding bloodlines toward a goal. The Tleilaxu just build whatever they want in a tank, with no reverence for where life is supposed to come from. To an order that treats human genetics as sacred, that's not science. It's blasphemy that happens to be for sale, but even the Tleilaxu need buyers. Every Gola, every face dancer, every impossible service they provide ultimately gets paid for, and all that money flows through the same vast financial machine that quietly runs the economy of the entire galaxy. To understand who really holds the purse strings of the universe, you have to understand CHOAM. We've talked about who has the armies and who has the bloodlines. Now let's talk about who has the money, because in Dune that might quietly be the most powerful thing of all. CHOAM is the reason. The full name is a mouthful, the Combined Honnet Ober Advancer Mercantiles, so most people just say CHOAM. And all you really need to know is this. It's the single company that controls essentially all trade across the entire universe. Every planet, every product, every shipment of goods between worlds runs through CHOAM in one way or another. If the guild owns the roads between the stars, CHOAM owns the marketplace at the end of them. And here's what makes it politically explosive. CHOAM isn't owned by one person. It's owned by shares. The Emperor holds a huge block of them. The great houses of the Landsraad hold the rest, divided up according to their wealth and influence. Profits from all that galactic trade get paid out according to how many shares and directorships you control. So in this universe, your seat at the CHOAM table is your real measure of power. Forget speeches and titles. How rich and how powerful you are comes down to your slice of CHOAM, which means economic power and political power are literally the same thing here. The more shares you hold, the more the galaxy's wealth flows to you, and the more leverage you have over everyone else. The Emperor uses his controlling stake as a tool to reward loyal houses and quietly starve rival ones. The great houses fight, scheme, and marry each other partly to shift those shares around. It's a corporate boardroom the size of a galaxy, where a shift in directorships can matter more than a battle. And here's the reveal that recontextualizes the entire story. You know the famous line, "He who controls the spice controls the universe"? People usually hear that as something mystical. It isn't. It's an accounting statement. Spice is the single most valuable commodity in existence, and it is by far the biggest revenue stream in all of CHOAM. Whoever controls Arrakis controls that stream, and controlling that stream means controlling the profits, the shares, and therefore the balance of power inside CHOAM itself. So step back and look at what's really happening in Dune. The Emperor handing Arrakis to House Atreides, then helping to rip it away. That was never really about one desert planet. It was a move to control the galaxy's single largest source of wealth and to keep any one house from getting rich and powerful enough to threaten the throne. The great feud of the whole saga is, underneath all the swords and prophecy, a hostile corporate takeover dressed up as a war. The blood is real, but the prize is a balance sheet, and the place where all those shares, votes, and rivalries actually get argued over, the political floor where economic power turns into real decisions and real feuds, is the assembly of the great houses themselves, the Landsraad. Here's a question that runs underneath the entire story of Dune, and almost nobody stops to ask it. If the Emperor rules over the whole known universe, why doesn't he just kill Duke Leto himself? Why the elaborate scheme, the disguised soldiers, the years of secret plotting? The answer is a word you've heard a few times already, but never really had explained. The Landsraad. The Landsraad is the assembly of all the great houses. Every noble family that matters in this universe, Atreides, Harkonnen, and dozens more you never meet by name, holds a seat in it. Think of it as a galactic senate made up entirely of the most powerful, most ambitious, most heavily armed families in existence. And on its own, it doesn't look like much. It's a council. People make speeches, but the Landsraad is the single most important reason the Emperor can't simply do whatever he wants. Because here's the balance we touched on in Part 1. The Emperor rules the great houses, but he only rules them one at a time. Individually, no single house can stand against the imperial throne and its Sardaukar, but collectively, if the Landsraad ever united and turned on him, the combined military might of all the great houses would crush House Corrino outright. Shaddam knows this. Every emperor for 10,000 years has known this. It's the invisible wall around the throne, and the entire Corrino strategy is built on making sure that wall never gets pointed in his direction. That's why the Emperor can't just murder a rival duke in broad daylight. Do that openly, and you've just told every other house that the throne murders its own nobles whenever it feels threatened. Suddenly, all those individually weak families have a very good reason to stop trusting the Emperor and start talking to each other. And a united Landsraad is the one thing that ends the Corrino dynasty. So the Emperor has to work in shadows through Harkonnen proxies and disguised troops, not because he's weak, but because getting caught would be political suicide. Now here's a piece most casual fans miss. The whole system runs on a shared rulebook called the Great Convention, the ancient laws of war that every house and even the Emperor has to obey. The most important rule: no atomics against human targets. Every great house secretly keeps a stockpile of nuclear weapons, a family atomics arsenal passed down for generations. They're allowed to have them. They are absolutely not allowed to use them on people, and the enforcement isn't a court or a police force, it's collective retaliation. Break the convention, use atomics on humans, and every other house is entitled to unite and wipe your family off the map. It's mutually assured destruction as a legal system. The threat of everyone ganging up on you is exactly what keeps the peace. The Landsraad is also where houses answer for their crimes. A family that violates the convention or attacks another house illegally can be brought before the Landsraad and judged by their peers, with the ultimate penalty being the loss of everything: their holdings, their name, their existence as a house. It's the one court even the Emperor pretends to respect. But not every grievance goes through the council. There's an older, bloodier tradition running alongside it called Canley, a formal feud, a legally recognized vendetta between two houses. When Canley is declared, it operates under strict rules, almost like a duel scaled up to entire families. This is the crucial detail about the Atreides and Harkonnen conflict. Their hatred isn't just personal, it's a formally sanctioned blood feud with centuries of history behind it. The forms of Canley are why certain killings are legitimate, and others would outrage the Landsraad. It's why the Baron has to be so careful about how the Atreides are seen to fall. So when you watch the great game of Dune unfold, the trap on Arrakis, the betrayal, the Emperor's cold calculation, Paul's eventual rise, understand that it's all being played on this one stage. Every move is calculated against how the Landsraad will react. Every atrocity has to be disguised or justified. The council itself barely lifts a finger, and yet its silent judgment shapes every single decision the powerful people in this story make. Which raises the obvious question: if the Emperor's power is boxed in on every side like this, what actually makes him so feared, and why does everyone still flinch at the mention of his name? The answer wears gray, comes from a planet that's essentially hell, and is the last faction we need to talk about: the Sardaukar. Every faction we've covered so far fights with something: money, prophecy, genetics, patience. The Sardaukar fight with fear, because for 10,000 years they've been the reason nobody dares move against the Emperor. On paper, House Corrino is just one great house among dozens. So how does a single family keep the entire galaxy in line? The answer is these men. The Sardaukar are the Emperor's personal army, a fighting force so brutal, so disciplined, and so utterly fanatical in their loyalty that a single Sardaukar legion is considered worth 10 times its number in ordinary house troops. When the Sardaukar show up, wars don't get fought, they get ended. But here's what most people don't stop to ask: where does an army like that actually come from? You don't train soldiers this terrifying on a parade ground. You forge them somewhere that does most of the killing for you. That somewhere is Salusa Secundus. Salusa Secundus is the Imperial prison planet, and it's one of the best kept open secrets in the whole universe. Once, long ago, it was the original throne world of House Corrino, until it was devastated and left a radioactive, blasted hellscape. Now the Emperor ships his worst criminals there and simply lets the planet do its work. The environment is so lethal: brutal heat, killing storms, scarcity, constant violence, that the majority of people dropped onto Salusa Secundus die within their first few years. There's no training program softer than that. Survival is the training program, and that's the terrible genius of it. The Emperor doesn't build the Sardaukar, Salusa Secundus builds them. The planet culls the weak automatically, and whoever's still breathing at the end is harder, faster, and more indifferent to death than any soldier a rival house could ever produce. Add fanatical, religious conditioning, and absolute loyalty to the throne on top of that, and you get warriors who genuinely believe dying for the Emperor is the highest thing a human being can do. They don't break. They don't retreat. They barely seem human once they're in the fight. Now remember that reward from Part 1? When the Emperor helped House Harkonnen wipe out House Atreides, he didn't trust the Baron to finish the job alone. The Harkonnen troops were never going to be enough against Duke Leto's forces. So the Emperor secretly folded his own Sardaukar into the assault, dressed in Harkonnen uniforms, flying Harkonnen colors, so that no one in the Landsraad would ever be able to prove the throne itself had ordered the murder of a great house. That's the whole reason Atreides fell so fast and so completely. It was never really Harkonnen power that destroyed them. It was the Emperor's terror troops hiding behind someone else's flag. So by this point in the story, the Sardaukar look unbeatable. They're the ultimate trump card, the thing that makes the Emperor untouchable and every scheme in the galaxy possible. And here's the detail that flips the entire universe on its head. The Sardaukar are so deadly because they were forged by a merciless planet. But Salusa Secundus isn't the harshest world in the Imperium. Arrakis is, and Arrakis has been forging a people of its own for far longer, the Fremen. Everyone, including the Emperor, made the exact same mistake. They saw desert nomads and assumed weakness. What they missed is that the same brutal logic that produced the Sardaukar had been running on Arrakis the entire time, only harder and for longer. If a killing planet makes the deadliest soldiers alive, then the deadliest planet makes the deadliest soldiers of all. When Paul Atreides finally unites the Fremen and turns them loose, the impossible happens. The Sardaukar meet an enemy that doesn't just match them, it beats them. Man for man, the Fremen are simply better, because Arrakis was always a crueler forge than Salusa Secundus ever was. And the moment the Sardaukar can be beaten, the Emperor's entire power over the galaxy evaporates. The one thing holding 10,000 years of Corrino rule together turns out to be breakable after all. And that's the quiet joke buried underneath all of Dune. Every faction we've walked through built its power on secrets, weapons, and control, houses, sisterhoods, empires, armies, and in the end, the whole board gets turned over by the one people everyone was arrogant enough to ignore. And that completes the picture. All 10 major powers of the Dune universe. 5 you can see. The Honorable House, the Cruel House, the Balancing Emperor, the Breeding Sisterhood, and the Desert People everyone underestimated. And 5 working underneath. The Guild that owns the stars, the Tleilaxu who manufacture life itself, CHOAM that owns the money, the Landsraad that binds the nobles, and the Sardaukar that hold the whole thing together by force. And once you see them all at once, the real genius of Dune clicks into place. Every single one of these factions believes it's the one truly in control. The Guild thinks it holds everyone hostage through travel. The Bene Gesserit think they're steering humanity itself. The Emperor thinks his Sardaukar make him untouchable. CHOAM thinks money is the real throne, and every last one of them depends on the same substance, from the same planet, guarded by the same people that everybody wrote off as savages. So the moment Paul Atreides can credibly threaten the spice, he isn't just beating an army. He's holding a knife to the throat of all 10 factions at once. That's the checkmate the entire saga was quietly building toward from the very first scene. If this breakdown finally made the politics of Dune click for you, do me a favor and subscribe. Lore Across Worlds digs into a universe like this one every single week, and there's a lot more coming. If you missed part 1, the link's right here to catch the first 5 factions, and let me know in the comments which universe you want me to break down next. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.